A man is Christmas shopping in Tokyo when he is mobbed by hundreds of children, holding out Pokémon cards for him to sign and chanting what he thinks is his name. At least, that's how magician Uri Geller described what happened to him in December 99. He may not be a reliable narrator, but according to multiple news sources, he did file a lawsuit against Nintendo a few months later, a lawsuit that led to permanent changes in the game, and according to some, is still unresolved 18 years later. What was Uri Geller's problem with Pokémon? Geller sought damages for the unlicensed use of his name and image. His claim? That Kadabra, the psychic-type Pokémon from Generation 1, was based on him. We don't have a copy of the lawsuit, so we can't talk about the legal substance of the complaint. But we can look at the comments that Geller and his lawyers made to the press in 1999 and 2000, when the story was reported. Let's take them one at a time.
Nintendo turned me into an evil, occult Pokémon character. Nintendo stole my identity by using my name and my signature image of a bent spoon.
Kadabra's visual design is obviously not based on Uri Geller. Okay, it's holding a spoon, an item closely associated with Geller, but it doesn't otherwise resemble him. But is it named after him? Nintendo said no. According to director Hiroshi Imanishi, none of the Pokémon characters is given a name based on the image of any particular person. And if you ignore Napoleon Bonaparte, Genghis Khan, the Egyptian pharaoh Cheops, Bruce Lee, and Jackie Chan, then that statement might be accurate. But it is true at least that Kadabra isn't named after a person. It and the other two monsters in its evolutionary chain, Abra and Alakazam, are named for magician's incantations, at least in translation. But in the original Japanese, Kadabra is called Yungera, usually transliterated as Yungara, and only one letter away from the Japanese spelling of Uri Geller's name. There's further evidence that this is no coincidence. Abra and Alakazam are called Casey, after American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce, and Phendan, perhaps after French magician Robert Houdin, but more likely after the American illusionist that took his name, Harry Houdini. So Imanishi's denial doesn't hold up. All three Pokémon take their Japanese names from real magicians or clairvoyants. The kids in Tokyo weren't chanting Geller's name, they were chanting Yungera. The name of the Pokémon that even kids could figure out was named after Uri Geller.
I wouldn't have given permission for an aggressive and, in one case, evil character to be based on me.
Aggressive? Okay, that could apply to most Pokémon. But is the character evil? Well, not exactly. But in the TCG, as well as the normal Kadabra card, there was another, Dark Kadabra. In Japanese, it's called Warui Yungera, Bad Yungera. If this was what Geller was referring to, then he's right. There did indeed exist a dark or bad version of his namesake Pokémon.
Geller said he was particularly offended that the Pokémon monster was depicted with lightning bolts on his chest, which he said were reminiscent of a similar symbol used by the Nazi SS. The monster also bears a star on his forehead, which Grossman said appeared to be a Star of David.
Okay, I'm not going to get into Nazi symbolism. This isn't that kind of history series. But I do want to point out that 2 lightning bolts and 3 wavy lines don't look that similar, and neither do a 6-pointed and a 5-pointed star. Those symbols on Yungera are a reference to something else entirely. In the 1930s, a psychologist named Carl Zener designed a deck of cards to use in his experiments on extrasensory perception. They feature 5 symbols: the plus, the circle, the square, the 3 wavy lines, and the star, which is always 5-pointed. You've probably seen these cards in use, here if nowhere else, and we know that the creators of Pokémon were thinking specifically about Zener cards for their psychic Pokémon, because here we see a deck of them in the anime, minutes before Yungera is first introduced.
A circle! A star.
Wait a second. You as well? Why are stars so difficult for all of these guys? I think I've been fair to Uri Geller so far, but this point doesn't make sense to me. Besides the fact that the symbols on the Pokémon are not the same as the ones they're being compared to. What's the implication here? That Pokémon is secretly Nazi propaganda for kids? Let's look at one more quote, this one provided to The Guardian by an unnamed Nintendo spokesperson.
I can't imagine Uri Geller would have such a following in Japan that they would name a Pokémon card after him.
If Uri Geller was unknown in Japan, that would make it much more likely that all of this was just a coincidence, that he'd imagined a connection where none existed. But Geller was well known in Japan, a household name even. He'd made regular appearances on Japanese television, and even called the country home for a while in the 80s. Contrary to the statement, it's entirely plausible that he would be a cultural referent in Japan. When people talk about this incident, it's usually with the implication that Geller made a frivolous or unfounded complaint. When he tweeted a poll on the subject, 93% of the respondents disagreed that the Pokémon was modelled on his identity. Look, there's probably good reason for general skepticism of Geller and his motives, but I've got to side with the 7% here. The core of his complaint was kind of true. Pokémon made an almost incomprehensible amount of money, and it had done so with a character in its roster who was inspired by Geller, at least in part, and the company, when they were called on it, had reflexively denied it. But Geller is a public figure, and it's not a harsh depiction. I'm not an expert on the law of Japan or the US or anywhere else, but Yungara seems to me to be the gentlest of parodies. It's hard to find information about the lawsuit. Nothing seems to have been reported after it was first filed. Some say the case went to court and was dismissed, but I couldn't find a reliable source for that. A 2008 interview with Masamitsu Hidaka, the director of the first few seasons of the Pokémon anime, said discussions were still ongoing after 8 years, and there was no immediate prospect of a settlement. So suing Nintendo was apparently super effective. It seems they were either legally prevented from using Yungara in certain contexts, or else were so worried about further legal action that they avoided the character entirely. And it looks a lot like those restrictions may never have been lifted. Kadabra trading cards haven't been issued since 2003, in neither Japanese nor English. Abra now evolves directly into Alakazam, skipping Kadabra, and the creature has barely appeared in the anime since the lawsuit. But Kadabra hasn't been removed from the video games. Whatever may have happened behind closed doors is a matter on which we can only speculate, but it would seem that it doesn't affect the games. Kadabra may have been written out of the Pokémon canon due to something that happened 18 years ago, but it's important to remember and commemorate history, to keep it alive whenever we get the chance. And Pokémon gives us an unusually direct opportunity to do this, because each game allows you to rename a Pokémon. So, the next time you happen to catch a Kadabra, remember this story, and be sure to give it the appropriate name. Hi, Chris here. Hope you enjoyed the video. This is the last of a series on gaming controversies. If you liked this one, you might want to check out the other 3. Next, we're going to try something quite different. If you want to know what that is as soon as it's announced, then be sure to subscribe for notifications and follow me on Twitter at Retrohistories. Huge thanks to my patrons, including the people on screen. Supporters get perks, including early access, weekly links, behind-the-scenes information, tutorials, even a pixel art avatar in the credits, and they directly support the production of videos like this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in the past.